my first project was the Cassini mission to Saturn, and my job was to operate its cameras. It's the advice that I like to give my students when I talk to them. Don't even let gravity hold you down, and I mean that sincerely. Why not go out in a ball of glory, do something we've never done before, and dive Cassini between Saturn's atmosphere and its rings for the first time ever. Like, no one's ever gone there before. That's what we did. It's called the grand finale. It had these proximal orbits that ended in a final one where Cassini is looking back at us on Earth, sending its final signal before goodbye. Everything out there is trying to kill you already. It's already trying to kill you. And our job is to deal with that. So it's not that we go to launch with our fingers crossed. But I do think that now's not the time to give up on Earth. Now's the time to use what we have learned to do something about it. And I really want to be a part of that.
Janelle, thank you for being here. We had a chance to meet at the InnoTalks last time. I remember your energy, so I'm super excited to have you here. You did uplift the whole panel last time with your energy. That's really what I remember. And I guess my first question for you is, who is Janelle and how will the people that you care about describe you?
Well, thank you for that. I think I just get really passionate about things that I do. So it's really easy for me to let out that energy. And even now, you asked the question, like, who am I? It makes me think of, well, like, where did I come from? Because I never in a million years would have thought I would be here, for example, on your podcast in Tokyo, in Japan, working on things in space. It's just not, it was never part of my roadmap or things that I thought were possible. My beginning started out in New Jersey, in a pretty normal family. Neither of my parents were STEM people, but somehow I ended up on this path. And I think it's because I've always been a fan of the question, why not? Like, why not do something?
I like that.
And for me, everything started with something really silly, a pamphlet in the mail that I was not expecting my junior year of high school. I come in, there's all this mail, and my mom is like, take a look at this. And I thought it was trash, honestly. It just looked like another flyer or whatever, throw it out. Yeah. My mom is like, this pamphlet is from a school called the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and you need to look at it. It's like, I had never heard of that school in my life, but I will look at it, Mom. All about this summer program. If you get in, you get to spend something like 6 weeks on campus learning all of these things with other students from around the country at MIT. And so I applied to it and didn't think anything of it until I got the letter saying I got in. And that really changed my life because I never really had it in my mind to go to one of these prestigious colleges. And that moment made it feel very real, like it could happen. And so, of course, I was all excited about MIT. At that point, I had fallen in love with the school during that program. And I started there as a freshman eventually.
What was the program about?
The program was a summer program called MITE. If you're asking me to remember what that stands for, it's going to be a little bit difficult. But the gist of the program, and I believe it's still going on today, is that it was open to basically high school students going into, I guess, their senior year. So it's the summer after their junior year completes. And it was geared towards teaching them about different STEM subjects and having that culminate into a project that they do with their peers, like competition style, basically. And you are learning from really fantastic professors. You're learning from teaching assistants who could go to schools like MIT, but other schools as well, like Harvard, for example. And you were really having like this first, well, at least for me, it was my first like away from home. You know, my parents left me in Massachusetts and I realized, okay, I'm really on my own.
Wait, how old are you back then?
Right now?
No, back then.
Back then, I want to say I was 16 at the time as like a late
because the school system in Belgium is completely different in terms of ages. That's why I'm like trying to also like
I mean, I spent my whole life like local basically. I'd never had this kind of experience of going to another state by myself. And it really changed me. Like as a person, it affected how I really thought about learning in a lot of ways. I'd always been a curious student. It's never in it for the grade, even though the grades were, I really didn't want to get my A's, but it was never the intention to do it for a grade. It was the intention to do it to learn something new. I
Right.
was always attracted to just learning because knowledge is just one of those things you can't get enough of. So yeah, that's where my journey began.
Nice. How did you get into space from there on?
Yeah, exactly. That's the next part. So I'm at MIT and my parents dropped me off, and this time it's for real. This time it's for the full college experience. And I'm looking around like, okay, so what am I supposed to do next? I knew like I wanted to go to the school, but to be quite honest, I didn't know what I wanted to major in or what I wanted to do. And so I tell some upperclassmen like my idea that I have going on in my head, which is that I want to become a theoretical mathematician. And they're like,
Wow.
maybe that's great, Janelle, but you also want to make money.
Yeah. Why would you even think about that in the first place?
I don't know. I had just gone down like this rabbit hole in high school where I became obsessed with this idea that there was a whole part of math that they hadn't even touched on while we were in school. And when I discovered like non-Euclidean math and started asking all these questions after geometry, really it was geometry that started it all. When they start defining things and there's theorems, I started asking a lot of questions about these theorems
That
and
deep
realizing,
curiosity.
yeah, that deep curiosity made me realize that my questions are valid, but they were applicable to another field of math. So I was very interested in seeing how I could push like the science forward, like the math forward, and see what could fall out from that. Because
Yeah.
that's the history that I remember learning about the most.
Yeah.
Like these really cool people who really push the envelope. So anyway, that was on my mind. But they said, you're at an engineering school, so how about you try engineering? And MIT makes it really easy to try something new. In fact, they encourage you to try something new versus just coming in with, I'm going to do this and this was my 10-year plan.
Yeah.
Like we have a ton of introductory courses and we encourage you to take them.
That's amazing.
So I looked at the list and I saw tons of engineering, your civil, ocean, mechanical, biological. Then I come across aerospace engineering. And honestly, I saw that word space and it got me a little excited.
Yeah.
Because, I may not have thought that one day I'd be an astronaut or anything, because I never met anyone who had a job like that. But I did think that space was cool. I think we may all inherently look up at the stars. Yeah, you just look up and it's just it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I went to that class and our professor's going over the syllabus and he says that we're going to learn things like the rocket equation, we're going to learn how planes fly, and we're also going to learn a little bit about the history of spaceflight. He shows us like this slide of him in space.
Himself.
Yes, he looks at us and says, "That's me, by the way."
Oh, that's wild. That's wild. Wow.
My heart was beating so fast because I could not believe I was breathing the same air as someone who had not only worked for NASA, but had been in space like a real life astronaut. And that was that, well, why not moment for me.
It makes such a difference to be in front of someone who's literally been in space. I feel in that kind of moment. Because I feel like it's kind of topics like aerospace, space in general, like most of people will be like, yeah, sounds interesting, but it doesn't really feel like I will be ever able to touch it, like to really do something with it.
Far away. Like how many of us casually just know someone who does this as their job, like it's a real job. I certainly hadn't, but I
was
did
that the moment where you like, because I mean, that moment kind of triggers your curiosity, I guess.
Yes.
But is it the same moment as well where you're like, okay, I'm really pursuing this very seriously, or you never really thought it, you just keep going down the rabbit hole? Like,
I mean, I think I just embraced the possibilities of what could be. And I thought of this aerospace as the stepping stone to potentially doing the things that I thought were impossible before.
Yeah.
Like I met an astronaut. So maybe it isn't crazy to think that one day you could do something as crazy as that. And so I just went into it thinking, let me learn as much as possible. I kind of picked up right away that looking at my other classmates, I was not on the same starting field. There are a lot of people in my class who knew this was for them. This is what they wanted to do. They came in out of high school already pilots. They could tell you about every rocket, every model, every number, fighter, jets. I did not know any of this information, but I went in with this idea of
Yeah.
I think I can learn, though. I can try. I can at least try. And that's
Mm,
exactly what I did. And I go to these classes and I start to pick up my own interest and the
yeah.
things that are really grabbing me and I'm gravitating towards. And I'm getting excited because I'm hearing my professors talking about these really cool places that you can work one day. And amongst them was actually the place that I ended up having my first real job, the
NASA.
NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Yeah, JPL. I had never heard of it. I knew of NASA.
Yeah.
Everyone knows NASA. And I think of, like Florida, the rockets, Texas, astronauts. But JPL, I was introduced to by my professors, by my classmates. And it became this thing that I was really reaching for because they were just doing phenomenal things. And they still are to this day. I don't know the date that this was recorded. NASA JPL just launched Europa Clipper mission to Jupiter to observe one of its icy moons. This is the kind of things that you get to work on at JPL. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
naturally, that's what I wanted to.
Yeah. You kind of got into it, your curiosity, then you're surrounded by all those extremely passionate people.
Yes.
And that helps as well, right? To
Oh,
continue
yeah.
to move forward. How did your parents feel as well? Were they excited or were they like, man, this sounds like a crazy career, like sounds very, very complex? Because I'm a father myself now. I'm like, okay, if my kid comes to me and it's like, I want to do this. I'm like, great, but what's the backup plan here?
Yeah.
So how did your parents feel about it in general?
My parents, they have always been really good in my life about just going with it. Like we're just gonna go with the flow of whatever I've got in my mind because I had a lot of passions growing up and I was never just a STEM person either.
Mm,
I've always used, both hemispheres of the brain, really big into literature. In fact, that's what I like concentrated in at MIT, Shakespeare. I loved writing. I loved reading. I did like the Model Congress when I was in school. Like being a lawyer was a really real possibility.
wow. Okay.
But I ended up going this way. I think maybe because math was always my true first love. And my mom says that. And my parents have always just been so encouraging, whether they knew what I was doing or not. They're like,
Yeah.
I know you're excited about this thing, but it's also 10 o'clock and you need to go to bed.
Yeah. You sound like someone who's more like, I guess, into the learning journey than the actual result as well, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and
I
that just
mean,
gets you to places and you're like, okay, great. That's
exactly.
just part of the journey, I guess.
It's
And you
part of the
just, I
journey.
love that.
Yes, just seeing what can be accomplished.
Yeah.
And then all this other cool stuff that falls out of it is really it. But I'm not really an event or object-oriented goal-setting type
I
of
think that's
person.
your probably the main strength that you have as well, because I feel like a lot of people, including myself, I've always had that mentality of like, okay, if I do this, what's in it? Like, what's the end goal? Meanwhile, it's like, okay, if you just focus on like learning, curiosity, and surround yourself by people who know more about the topic,
I
you'll
see.
probably get to very, very cool places, right?
I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing either, though. Sometimes I wish I had a little more structure. And I think that I'm coming from a privileged place in that my interests and my curiosities have given me jobs and careers and opportunities to be able to continue like this love of learning and knowledge. Because, I'm an engineer at the end of the day, and engineers, we make good money. Like there's nothing I have to worry about in my life in
Yeah.
terms of financial
Do you think the
stability.
timing also helps a lot? Because maybe if you get into the space industry, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years before, for example, or like
Yeah.
you might just end up in an industry where not
Exactly.
much happens.
I'm
Or like,
telling you, all the stars aligned for this to happen. I just so happened to choose aerospace engineering after going to that class, and I got into it at a time when space was getting super hot. When I started my first job, The Martian had come out, we had Interstellar,
Yeah.
Gravity. I mean, Hollywood was all over space. Normal people, the public was very into space again. It was
the
like
funding as well.
the funding was there. We have big players like SpaceX showing people that, this is no longer just a government thing anymore. I came in at a very exciting time for this industry. And it was never like my grand plan to do that. It just happened to be that way.
But it's good to be conscious of that luck, I guess.
Yeah.
You mentioned like NASA, like how was it to work there? Like walk us through the journey. And, like,
Oh man, what an amazing experience. And I remember still to this day the anxiety and the nervousness I had
I can
my
imagine.
first day. I mean, it's one thing to get the call saying you got the job. It's another thing to drive in on your first day and be like, oh my God, but it's actually happening right now.
What was your
And
title when you start there as well? Like walk us really from the
yeah,
beginning.
the very beginning. When I signed that contract saying I'm coming on to NASA JPL, my title was Instrument Operations Engineer. And I can tell you now,
Pretty cool.
I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does that mean actually? But yeah.
Yes, I was just excited to be there. I knew that I liked the manager and I heard the projects I could work on were cool. But what exactly is an instrument operations engineer? I learned. So I like to think of it this way. You have your spacecraft, your satellites, these space vehicles. You can think of them like your car. Their intention is to get you to point A to point B in one piece, keep you alive and well for the journey, and help you to start whatever the mission is. The instruments, they're scientific instruments. These are extremely novel technology that are supposed to allow us to learn more about the places that we're going. These answer the questions of the why, the how, the when. You want to know more about where
collecting
you're going
data
to.
and
You're
all.
collecting the data, you're taking the pictures, you're understanding the chemical makeup, you're trying to answer the big questions. The science instruments do that. The other part of the title is operations engineer. So what do? I am an engineer who gets to operate the scientific instruments that we put on our spacecraft. And what did that look like in practice, like in reality? My first project was the Cassini mission to Saturn, and my job was to operate its cameras. I call them cameras, but they're fancy, fancy, dancy space cameras.
Okay.
And what what a cool job.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I'm working in the Mission Control Center. I'm working in the place where we actually talk to the things that we put in space. My job is to generate the commands, to look at the data, the telemetry, we call it, coming back down, to understand what it means, to be an investigator, to be the thing between you and the mission happening.
Yeah. I mean, without that, it's literally you just have some hardware up there and
Yeah.
nothing really.
But I think that actually most people don't know we exist because
True.
when a lot of my missions, we'll launch something to space and I get all these text messages say, congratulations, Janelle. Like, what are you going to do now? Are you going out to celebrate? I'm like, oh, I think there's a big disconnect between what you think my job is and what it actually is.
Yeah.
Because my job starts in earnest when we are in space. I'm in the mission control. The spacecraft doesn't just do it all itself. We are there. We are there to help it do the things it needs to do. And so it's a very exhilarating job. It's a job that puts you right in the middle of all of the ups and downs, of the excitement of accomplishing that thing, that goal. That is our job.
Sounds super stressful as well. Sounds like super stressful.
Yeah.
Like how much stress do you have to deal with, like on a daily basis, and like because maybe when you start you're young as well. You don't really realize, but the more you have seniority, the more you start realizing, I guess, the money that you're playing with, like the tools are expensive. Like walk us through that, like the stress levels.
I would say the stress varies depending on what kind of project I'm working on at the time. But I will say when I first started off, I was very stressed. When I realized that the tools I was using, the software I was using, was going to be sent to the spacecraft. And it was going to do whatever I had put together here on the ground. I got very nervous because then it felt like, well, if I do something wrong, that's going up there on that multi-billion-dollar spacecraft. Especially when you're first starting out. I would call my parents and say, guys, they are literally putting me in charge of doing the command sequencing for this, like...
That's like your first year? Like
yes, it was my first year. Yeah.
So there's no warm-up. You're just thrown in there.
There was definitely a warm-up. There was months of me shadowing, of me learning from literally experts. I mean, my first project was on a project that frankly did not need me at all. This is a well-oiled machine. The Cassini mission to Saturn, it's a legendary. It's legendary. The team is legendary. They did phenomenal things. And I joined actually at a crazy time. If I wasn't the last hire, I was one of the last hires onto the team because Cassini was going through something called the grand finale. where after about 20 years of being in space, it was finally coming to an end because it had run out of fuel. And instead of letting our space junk stay in orbit around this beautiful planet, Saturn, and all of the moons that the scientists and the engineers had discovered over that time, 60 plus moons, especially moons that might have signs of water and therefore life, like Enceladus, like Titan. Like, why not go out in a ball of glory, do something we've never done before, and dive Cassini between Saturn's atmosphere and its rings for the first time ever? Like, no one's ever gone there before. That's what we did. It's called the grand finale. It had these proximal orbits that ended in a final one where Cassini is looking back at us on Earth, sending its final signal before goodbye. And
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was there for that.
And
I
that
got
was
to
your
experience
first
that.
mission.
That was my first mission.
And it's a very important one as well in the
Very
history of space.
important. It's very important for me in my career, I think. It was very powerful to have experienced the end like that because it made me appreciate so much more the effort that it took to get to a point like that. And for them to just allow me to be a part of such a, to me, an intimate moment was really special. To have these experts in their field just welcome me with open arms, teach me the ropes, give me a shot, and let me experience that.
I mean, the competition must be insane to get into that position as well. Like, why did you end up in that privileged position?
Like, how me? What? I'm the girl who came in and didn't even know I wanted to be in aerospace.
Like, how many people apply, or how does it even work? Like, I don't even know about the job. And how is there an interview as well to get there?
Yes, there is. So my experience was that I was turned down quite a few times before I got the job at JPL. I was very excited to work there. We had a career fair every year, every fall. These companies come in and they want to recruit MIT students. So you get in line with all your classmates to the same,
how many people
15,
roughly?
20. It's the entire school has off during the career fair. And everybody is there trying to land their internship, their full-time job, whatever it may be. The whole school is there. And so, with the aerospace engineers, we're all kind of following each other around because we know we're all going to the same, the same companies. And I'm over here overhearing their conversations and saying, oh my gosh, it is definitely not enough to just go to school. You need to do some things, impressive things. And so, my first time applying, it's understandable. They said no. I'm still kind of figuring out who I am at this point too. The second time around, I'm getting more confidence. I'm kind of figuring out where I fit into all of this, what I like, what I don't like. Still didn't get the job. Third time, it wasn't for an internship anymore. It's for the full-time deal. And, I think I had just taken all those rejections in stride and used them to fuel what I should do next. Okay, I didn't get it this time. Let me talk to my classmates who did. Let me figure out where my passion is. I want it to be so that I'm not trying to convince JPL to hire me, but JPL wants to hire me. They feel like they need to. They're missing out if they don't hire me. And I really just dove completely into my passions. I was in the clubs. I was taking the classes I really cared about. I was taking more classes than I needed just because I thought they were cool. And it gave me this very unique skill set, I think, that got the attention of very particular managers at JPL, where I eventually was able to do the interview, get to that first panel of 3 managers looking at you in this tiny behind room. I'm just like, don't mess up and don't say something stupid. To getting the call that they want to fly you out on campus for a full day, where I have to present something called How I Can Help JPL Succeed in Its Mission first thing in the morning, and then proceed to have the rest of the 8 hours of the day spent interviewing with different people around the lab.
That's wild.
It was
I feel
something.
like most people as well will react and saying, well, because you're mentioning, every time you fail, you're building up more and more confidence.
Yeah.
So that you're ready. But most people feel the opposite way. If you don't get the internship, that's where your confidence kind of gets stripped away all the time, more and more, and you're ending up very miserable. How do you what allows you to kind of build confidence from failure? Because most people are completely the opposite, right?
Right. I think that I learned very early on, and I'm very grateful for this, and it kind of goes back to that summer program that I did early on. I learned that failure is simply part of the process. And the sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. MIT is the type of school that attracts students who were the absolute top of their class. They were number one, they were valedictorian, they were national whatevers, champions. And you put all of these people in the same place. And maybe for the first time in their life, they are challenged in a class. And the concept does not just come to them right away. And it's very much this mentality, and there's a saying at MIT, it's called like the fire hose. It's like there's no way for you to get every drop. If you have a fire hose that you're drinking from, you cannot get every drop. But the goal is just to get as much as you can.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that working with others, going to the teaching assistants, talking to the professors, engaging in lecture, not just showing up, but really trying to engage in the lecture and learn something. This is what was going to help me in the long run. I know I'm not going to always get it on the first time, but I know that I have been given the tools to overcome that. And that's what real life is all about too.
Yeah, learning is failing, right? And
Yes.
if you get that part, like, and then the curiosity drives the whole thing all the time. You just want to learn more and more, and
I feel
you
like
want to fail more and more, I guess, as well.
for all the people out there who have never failed, I wonder, like, do you live in constant fear of failure? Because I'm not afraid of failure anymore. It's not something that I'm striving for, of course. I want to succeed, but I don't live in fear of failure because I've experienced it. And I know that I can bounce back from it.
Yeah, like my entire youth until I left Belgium, basically, I was in a situation where I was so scared of failing, so I barely tried anything. And then I guess it's a bit similar in the sense that I left home and I ended up in Canada around 21. No friends, nothing, didn't speak really well the language. And then it's like, oh, well, there's no way I have to fail all the time. And start really enjoying it at this point. It's like, oh, wow, I'm out failing everyone now. And I'm learning more than anyone. And so I can relate to it. But
you absolutely
space
can.
Sounds cool, though. That sounds like the next level of like, you can't be scared. That's crazy.
I mean, what you just shared is really, that's the really important part of it, though. It's the, if you don't even, you won't even try.
Yeah.
And you can't have the why not mentality if you don't try.
Yeah, I like that as well, the why not. I often, like, even from my end, it's like I share often what I want to do to people, and they will always ask me why. I'm like, oh, but why not? And I'm like, oh, like then I'll go back to Wannes usually, or like to my friends. Like, I think I have a good idea here because everyone tells me that it sounds crazy. I'm like, let's try this. Same with the podcast. Like, everyone's like, oh, podcast this. I'm like, but why not? Like, we meet all those cool people. Like, let's just do it. And I guess here we are. Who has been the biggest influence in your career, would you say?
This is a tough question. Like I kind of explained, I didn't get into this field in any traditional route. I didn't have like a parent or a family member who was holding my hand through the process or showing me the ropes. None of my mentors were built in. All of my mentors were found. They were people who appeared in my life at the right times and were just that little bit of encouragement that I needed to remind myself that I am allowed to be here and I can do well here. And when I think to like the most important person, it's kind of like a group of people, if I can cheat a little. But I'd have to say that it's very clearly been my coworkers. The people that I worked with on a day-to-day basis. I think I've been so lucky and blessed in the fact that every team I've worked on in this field has been such a pleasure to be around, to learn from. I mean, these are people, like I said, who let me into their masterpieces, like a Cassini mission, but also I worked on the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. I worked on 3 Earth missions. Every single person I worked with, to me, I was beside people who were giants. They were legends to me. They had decades of experience, but they were so open to sharing that experience with me. I could just, I had this sense that the people I worked with were rooting for my success. And they were actively cheering me on and giving me opportunities and recognizing when I could do things well and giving me more because of that. And even here in Tokyo, my current job, working at iSpace, it continues. Like, I feel like I've just been surrounded by people who want to lift me up, and it's allowed me to thrive.
Don't you think it's maybe a skill that you developed as well, to surround yourself by such amazing people?
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly sure because depending on who you talk to, you might get different stories at the exact same company. I think that your team is the people that you deal with the most,
Yeah.
and your daily experience is what you are going to take away. It doesn't matter if your company is amazing, fantastic, historic. What matters is how do you feel going into work every day?
Yeah.
And I haven't really like chosen my teams. Maybe it's like a mutual process. When you interview, you know someone for maybe a few weeks at most, so you don't know for sure. But I've definitely gotten lucky that the teams I've worked on have been so supportive.
The reason I'm asking because I meet a lot of. I mean, I'm so lucky as well in the sense that like I work with so many interesting people, and all those very successful people in what they do. They always say the same thing as well. It's like I'm surrounded by amazing people. And I feel like it's just a skill at some point. You're like getting very, very good at seeing how good people are. And maybe it's like, I get luckier and luckier. And I'm like, maybe it's a skill that you develop because, again, I'm looking at my background. It's like until I left my country, the people around me were great, but they were never really very good at something. They didn't go really deep into something. And suddenly now I'm surrounded by only people who are very, very good at what they do. And and I'm like, why? Like, am I lucky? No, I think it's just I really want to feel like, I guess, stupid in the room very often as well. I enjoy feeling stupid. I feel like this is a good room to me. Like,
there is definitely something to that.
Right?
The feeling stupid. I can't remember the last time I was the smartest person in the room. Like, it's not something. In fact, I feel like if I ever felt
right
that
way,
no.
Enjoy.
No, we all have our own talents. I couldn't even open the door to get out of this room. We have our own strengths and weaknesses. But I will say that I've never felt stagnant. Never felt stagnant. And I feel like it's because I don't like that. I don't like feeling comfortable. I like feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I want to have a little bit of that fear in me that maybe I don't really know what I'm doing. It's going to be, I got to prove myself a little bit. I've got to learn this difficult thing I've never had to learn before. I think you're right. It's a talent and also like a personality set, because I think some people are okay with just staying in their comfort zone. And for some people, that might be the right thing for you in that time of your life too. Sometimes stability is what you need. But for me, and at this point in my life, I am all for the excitement, the unknown, the taking chances.
Yeah. I got to a point where I feel uncomfortable in the comfort zone. Like that's how bad it got for me. I really had to condition myself to it. But like, okay, so what will be the biggest, I guess, takeaway from NASA? Because I also wanted to talk a little bit more about your transition to Japan, which is completely getting out of your comfort zone again, if we can call NASA a comfort zone. But like, what will be the biggest takeaway from NASA, would you say?
My biggest takeaway probably was that whoever you think in your mind of as the untouchable, unreachable, genius person is probably more like you than you know. And in my time at JPL, I had the absolute privilege of being able to meet superstars. I was in line at the coffee cart one day with my friend. We're just taking a break and we're talking to each other about our projects that we're working on. We're like, oh my gosh, like, it's crazy that any of this stuff works. My plate is full and we're not sure how we're going to do this operation. And this guy in front of us is like, yeah, it's crazy that anything works here. And I didn't know who it was. I'm like, yeah. He leaves with this donut or whatever he had. And my friend is like, do you know who that was? I was like, no. He's like, that's the chief engineer of the lab. I was like, oh.
Wow.
But the thing is, the chief engineer of the lab is extremely approachable. I could talk to a person
and he felt
like
the same
that.
Emotion as you. Like, what the hell is going on?
Exactly. And the more I spoke to people who were at the director level or even the director of the lab, I had a relationship with people on the executive council of JPL. The more I learned, and through them, is that, life is a journey. They also started off, in a sense, like me, not necessarily being sure of themselves, definitely not imagining that one day they'd have these types of positions and going through the motions of becoming a leader by trying things, by failing sometimes. And it really gave me like this clarity that, these people we look to and we say, wow, don't consider yourself out of the running. Like, that can be for you too.
That's amazing. Yeah. keeps you confident as well. And I think also it's the great thing about the space industry probably as well. It's so new that everyone has to stay very humble all the time probably, otherwise you will stagnate, right? Like, or maybe I'm wrong here, but like I feel like it's maybe the nature of that specific industry as well, where people it's so new.
It might be like it's new and it's old. You know, NASA's been around for a long time. JPL has been around longer than NASA even. And talking like the 1950s is when this kind of stuff started. But I will absolutely say, in the places that I've worked, being humble is like part of the deal. Like I said, I'm always in a room with people who are smarter than me. It's hard to be in a room at a place like JPL and feel like you're the know-it-all and nobody else in the room has anything to contribute. And it really teaches you that collaboration, listening to others, valuing inputs no matter where they come from. I'm talking to the intern level. No matter where they come from is a part of what makes these places great. And if you don't have that open mind, if you're very closed off, if you think your way is the only way and nobody else has anything, you're not going to do too well in an industry like this that requires you to think outside of the box, to take advantage of everybody's ideas, because that's what makes it successful.
I think, every industry probably cool to learn from that mindset in general. Right? Let's go to Japan. Like, when, why, how? Even if you don't really know yet, maybe. How long have you been in Japan for now?
For 2.5 years now.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
Walk me through that, like that transition.
Like I said, Japan was never in the plan. I had actually come to Japan on vacation like once. That was my first international trip after getting my first real job at NASA. Some friends of mine were like, hey, you want to go to Japan? We're living in California. It's a lot closer than when we were on the East Coast. And we came for 10 days, lived it up, had the time of our life. So this is great. Had no clue that like, what was that? Maybe 3 years, 2-3 years later, I would get this random message on LinkedIn, which I don't even use that much. I'm sorry, LinkedIn, but I don't. Happen to check my inbox, and I see a message from somebody saying that they work for a company called iSpace. And there's this position that they have open. It is a chance to become a flight director on their first mission, Mission 1, to attempt to land on the moon. Something that at that point, no non-government company had ever done before. Like, so, yeah, we saw your profile and we think you're a really good fit and we think that you should apply to this role. And by the way, it's in Tokyo. I thought the whole thing was a setup or something. Like, what?
My friend is making a joke.
Yeah. Like, how random is this? Like, how do you know me? How did you find me? My profile. I was completely taken aback. And the more I looked into it, the more legitimate it actually started to seem. And then I had like this random flashback to my sophomore year of engineering at MIT when my professor was talking about companies that had competed in the Google X Prize, and the name SpaceX came up and the name iSpace came up too. I had heard of this company before. I go forward with the interview because why not? And I get the job, which I was not expecting. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, well, I did not think I would get to this point. So now I'm really thinking, I've never had the conversation with myself of, would I ever leave NASA? Like, I'm at my dream job. I went to school. I found out that this was the place to be, and I didn't want to leave, having the time of my life at JPL. So I told them no, actually. And for a year, during the pandemic too, I'm sitting here and I can't get it off my mind. Like this thought that I was given the opportunity to move to another country, a country that I happen to like. I've been there before, to become a flight director.
What's a flight director, just to have a sense of the actual
what is a
position?
flight director?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm like...
Well, at NASA, a flight director is not something that becomes part of your job title unless you put in decades of experience. It is a role that leads you to have the ultimate responsibility in the Mission Control Center. So when you watch those videos maybe of the people sitting in the console and they have their headsets on and they're calling out the events that are going on, this is our job, and the flight director's job is to be in charge of those real-time operations. You are the head of the room. So when people find issues, when they have problems, they're looking to you for your leadership on how to solve them, what to do next to keep us on schedule, to keep it going.
My heart is beating just listening. Oh, I'm stressed. Okay, wait.
It
It's
is
crazy.
very like it's an unreal
Yeah.
title to have, and it's a title that takes full advantage not just of your technical expertise and your depth, but also your soft skills are just as important.
Yeah.
If you cannot be the voice of reason, or you cannot be the source of calm, of the let's go back to our training, we've seen this before, let's take a deep breath, everyone, let's just get ourselves into a safe state, let's talk through what we've got, see if we can get some more data, is very methodical, but you really have to have control over your emotions and be able to do that. Otherwise, they will pick up on your energy and they will feel the same way too. If you come in there nervous, everyone else is nervous. You have to be the one that comes in there optimistic. You have to come in with the right attitude, and you have to come in being a leader so that people look to you as a leader.
Wow.
So that's the title of a flight director. And
well, you're still so young, right? So, like, how old is usually a flight director in the industry?
Well, historically, if we look back to the 1960s, the flight directors of the Apollo missions, this is humans in the loop. Mind you, at this point in my career, I've never worked with humans in the loop. I send robots, hunks of metal to space to do very cool stuff, but I have never had human life in my hands. The people who did this during that era, they were in their 20s and 30s.
Oh, wow.
And I think that this is actually still not that uncommon because the lifestyle of a flight director is not one that I would say is conducive of having a reasonable family life, of, being able to take care of very real responsibilities in your life. I'm not saying it's not possible, and there absolutely are flight directors who have been doing it forever, and they love this, and this is their life, and they've found a way to make it work. But this is a type of job that has you working on Saturday and Sunday, that has you working on holidays, that has you working at 2 a.m., that has you working 12-hour shifts. It pushes you to the limit, not just technically, but mentally. And it's not the type of job that you go home and you forget about it.
Yeah, people ask you about your life balance, you just ignore the question, I guess.
I do have a life balance, though. I take great pride in the fact, and I was the same way in college, that on my days off, I enjoy my day off. However, I can tell you right now, if I get a call from one of my teammates and we have something going on, there's a situation, I will drop what I am doing to
So
be
you're
there.
always still a little bit, like, it's hard to completely disconnect.
You kind of have to, but it's not because you're forced to. That's the thing. When you are an operator, when you are intimately involved in the day-to-day of your spacecraft, how it's doing, how it's performing, you know about the big milestones coming up, the planning, everything that went into it. You're part of the rehearsals, the training. You are invested in the success of the mission. You're invested. You want it to succeed. So, of course, if you go home after, a wild shift, not wild for bad reasons, but it was just exhilarating. You did all these things that you always wanted to do. You did the perfect burn, the maneuver, the trajectory looks good. It's hard to come down from that high. Like it is still on your mind, but it's because you're like, wow, like we're doing this thing. Like it's happening.
Yeah. I feel the same about running a company, to be fair. Same feeling, actually.
Wow.
It's like that it's your baby kind of thing, right? It's like it has to work. Too much work has been put into it, too much energy, time. It has to work out.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs, you guys are a different breed. I don't know how you do it. I can, that
you
does
probably
not
could do it, to be fair.
It's your baby. Like you say, we say the same thing about our spacecraft. It's our baby.
So you got that flight director job.
Yeah.
And you didn't expect it at all, basically.
I didn't expect it at all. And after thinking about it for a year, I realized what better time than now to not only make this leap, but to do something that I never envisioned myself doing at this stage in my life, at this age. I'm like in my mid-20s.
In Japan, with all those cultures.
In Japan, the cultural difference, the life changes that would bring about. I was like, you know what? Let's just go for it. Because when it's next time in my life, then I'm going to be offered something like this.
Another thing as well, Janelle, is like you received a job offer, you rejected it, and a year later you decide to accept it. Did they wait for you that long? Like,
I don't think they were necessarily waiting for me,
Yeah.
but I will say that the manager of the team that was trying to hire me, he was very persistent. He did not disappear in that year. He was constantly reminding me. He wanted to call. He really wanted to show me that this opportunity is one of those once in a lifetime things that I had no reason to not try. You know, he's telling me, you come to Japan, you absolutely hate it. Let's say you absolutely, you hate it. Just give us a year. Just give us a year to just try it, because I think that you're going to like it. And it made me realize that decisions that you make in your life are not necessarily permanent, first of all.
Yeah, but is NASA a place where the door stays open as well?
Well, you only find that out when you leave and you hear the feedback and it's like, don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Yeah.
But instead, you know, when I left NASA, it was actually, there are a lot of tears. And saying goodbye to my bosses, my teammates, my supervisors, it was really hard. And I hadn't even been there that long. In the grand scheme of JPLers, you know, there are a lot of people at JPL who are there for life. I had been there for a little over 5.5 years. But I will say that I spent those 5.5 years meeting so many people across the lab, across disciplines. They were not all engineers and scientists. I met people from all walks of life. And JPL had become a part of my life, a part of who I was as a person. So leaving was very difficult. And I think that people appreciated that I took NASA very seriously, and I took my job very seriously and my career there. And I truly did love the place. And I was in no means leaving because I thought NASA wasn't for me, but it was to try out this other thing. And look, NASA did not implode. They're still there.
Yeah, and I think in the end, like the reason you join us, the reason of you ending up there is the same reason you end up in iSpace. Was like this drive of trying new things,
just
and
trying the new
getting out of the
thing.
comfort. It's pretty inspiring. Did you have other people from NASA kind of going to other countries at that point because they saw what you did, or like any people got really inspired and like, hey, let's do it as well?
I have had like quite a few people who have reached out to me, some just with their support. I mean, we still cheer each other on. I'm still friends with so many people. I was just in Los Angeles.
You're growing the industry together, right?
Yeah, we grow together. We know each other. We cheer each other on. I mean, there are people who I've never met before who are working at other companies who I'm going to be meeting for the first time this week. I have space superstars coming to Japan and we're going to hang out in Tokyo. Awesome. It's such a tight-knit community, and we truly are. We are really rooting for each other's success. At least from the engineering point of view, it's not like this competition to beat each other down. It's really a competition to see how far we can push it, because we want to push it all the way.
That's, yeah. Like, do you believe it will be possible to have like all the countries in the world agreeing on that level? Like to just push on the engineering side of things, and like, do you think it's possible?
That's like the International Space Station. That project was not just technical excellence and feats that we never knew we could do as humanity coming together. It was also a very intentional project of peace. Because you have this thing where you literally are relying on the other people who are around you. You are in this living habitat like the size of a football field with a few other people who, if something were to happen, you're going to trust them with your life. Like, that's just the way that it works. And you're also some of the few people in the world who have had the experience of living without borders. You are not in another country at that point. You are together looking down on this blue orb, and you can see how small it really is in the grand scheme of things. It's a life-changing thing. And so I've always believed that space is something that can be used to bring us together globally. And I think it's so important for that. And I really am hoping for a future where that continues to be a reality. Because the International Space Station is being decommissioned. It is at the end of its life. I forget how many years it has left. I know I did a quiz about this at a conference before. I can't believe I forget.
I'm not going to ask you.
Google will tell you, but it's not going to be around forever. And I'm really looking forward to more chances for countries to collaborate like this, just like how we're doing at iSpace. I mean, being at iSpace, this place is a unicorn to me as an American, specifically as an American who, aerospace is huge in America. There are so many options, there are so many companies, there are so many choices, but there is such a lack of diversity when it comes to having a global team especially in the kind of role that I have, that is protected by ITAR and EAR, these laws and regulations that literally say you cannot work with a non-American citizen. So the chance to be here is actually not something that I fully appreciated until I was in it, that
Yeah.
I'm now on a team with people from Belgium and Spain and France and America too, we're here, Brazil, Thailand. I mean, I've never worked with this many people from around the world in my entire life. And now we're doing like this incredibly amazing thing together. And we're representing our countries together.
In Japan.
In Japan. So
it's special.
Yeah, it's very special.
What's the culture like at iSpace?
The culture, I like to maybe compare it a little bit to NASA to really bring out what makes it interesting. So JPL, I should say JPL specifically, it's located in Los Angeles. We're in Pasadena, California, with like mountains that I can see from my office window. You go to work, there's a guy wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt and flip-flops, and it turns out that he's the guy who figured out how to land us on Mars. This is the kind of culture at JPL. It's a place where amazing things happen. It has these government ties, but it's a little different than the other NASA centers because we're government contractors, at least the people are, and it allows us to do things a little differently. But there's this mantra at JPL called Dare Mighty Things. And I think that this energy, though...
Dare Mighty Things.
Dare Mighty Things. I think now it's Dare Mighty Things together. So I think that really does apply to what we're doing at iSpace right now, too. So there's certainly similarities in the fact that I go to work in this beautiful building in Nihonbashi with salarymen dressed in suits and stuff, and me and my coworkers show up in jeans and a t-shirt.
The contrast is huge.
The contrast is huge, but that energy of, who cares what you look like? Let's just get this thing done. Yeah. That is still present. The other big thing is, of course, the size. JPL is thousands and thousands. iSpace is not even hundreds.
Yeah.
So you've got a huge, in my opinion, a huge project. We're talking about a lunar lander. We're talking about something that's never been done before. And you've got something like 150 people. They're not all engineers. This is everybody in this Tokyo location. And your goal is to do this crazy thing, to dare mighty things with these people. And that energy is absolutely present. And you can feel it. And I'll just say, there are so many memories I have working at iSpace, even though I haven't been there that long, 2.5 years. It's not a long time. Yeah. But it feels like a lifetime because it feels like we as an organization, as a company, we have experienced our missions together in a way that's unforgettable. I remember when we got to the lunar orbit in our first mission and we brought everyone together to celebrate this milestone. We are inserted in the moon's orbit. We are orbiting the moon right now.
As a private company.
As a private company. I mean, some people were in tears. So this realization that their hard work, their years of dedication, it meant something. And we were seeing the results of that. It is just really special.
Sounds like it. You guys are always also I guess hiring more and more engineers. What does qualify someone to be a great addition to the team? Would you say what kind of personalities are you looking for?
We're really looking for people who are agile, people who can adapt, people who are not so far in the weeds of things have to be done a certain way that it hinders the possibility for growth. We're in a situation where you don't have the funds of a government necessarily. You don't have infinite money. It's not, and I'm not saying that NASA has infinite money. They certainly do not, and they have to deal with government, changes and things like this and budgets. But here, every bit counts, every bit matters, and your ingenuity absolutely matters.
Yeah.
And there's really not the room for doubting the possibility or the potential for what the company can do. If you're going to come to a place like iSpace, it's be on board 100%.
Yeah.
And it's an attitude of find a way. You have to be the type of engineer who will find a way with what you got, but figure it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the limited resources makes a big difference.
it does.
And in terms of the skill sets that you learned, like because you worked for government side and now private side, like do you feel like what you can learn on private side is the government side will learn a lot from it as well? Like if we will actually mix everything up together, for example, all that knowledge, all that way of working together, like
Yeah.
even for you personally, like do you feel like you acquired a lot of skill sets that if you ever go back to NASA, for example, you will be a very different engineer?
Yes and no. I think both industries have so much to offer. On the government side, on the NASA side, I learned how NASA has gotten to a place out of being alive for many, many decades, of being able to do these incredible things and getting them pretty good, getting it pretty right. Of course, they've had failures. Everyone who works in space has failures. There's not a single mission on Earth that has not had something unexpected happen.
You gotta fail.
You have to. It's the nature of the business. But NASA has found ways to build to buy down the risk. And they buy down the risk by a lot of ways. Their flight director is probably in their 40s. I'm not saying all of them are, but their flight director is someone who has years and years of experience. Their flight director is this and that. Their processes are born of failures. Why do you think they do it the way they do it? Because they didn't do it this one time. And guess what? They learned a lesson. Their Bible of lessons learned is invaluable. And a company like iSpace or new companies, that's something that we have to build up. You can get some of that from the experience of your engineers and the people that you hire. So I come with the experience of the products that I got to work on, the people that I got to talk to, as well as my coworkers and the industries they came from. We bring that with us. But we also bring together the fact that we weren't at one place for forever. We've moved around, and that gives you different perspective. And so I think that if I were to go back, I'm coming with a toolkit of there's basically nothing that I would give up on at this point. I have seen with my own eyes what teams are able to do when they are really, like you said, lacking resources or don't have all the resources. It's being able to think on your feet quickly and to be able to make things work. I mean, the problem solving that I get to do here is off the charts. It's invaluable, and I would not have gotten it if I had stayed at NASA. I would have gotten it eventually, but I would not have gotten it in 2.5 years. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Less resources mean probably you just learn way faster because it's just resources are time savings, basically, right? And now you have to go the other way, I guess, and inverse the whole thing. That's interesting. How about the uniqueness of Japan? Like, do you feel like you changed as an engineer by being in Japan? Like the way you have maybe to communicate with Japanese engineers? Like, what has Japan taught you as a person and as an engineer?
Japan has taught me that people are more similar than we may think, because I think I definitely had some nervousness in coming to this country and looking up all the YouTube videos of what not to do, what to do. When you get in an elevator, where are you supposed to stand? Are you supposed to be the one who hits the buttons, or is... I looked up everything. I wanted to not embarrass myself. I wanted to make a good impression. And I got here and I started talking to my coworkers. Began to realize very quickly that, one, since everyone in the office speaks English, my Japanese coworkers are very open-minded. They're very used to being around foreigners, and they forgive us for a lot of our mistakes, which I'm very thankful for.
But you do speak some Japanese now, or?
You try to make me look bad?
No worries. I've been here 5 years. Don't worry. I don't speak Japanese myself. So
I would really love to learn Japanese, but to be honest, these 2.5 years have been a serious whirlwind for me.
You sound busy.
I mean, I got here, and within a year we launched.
Yeah.
Within a year we launched.
You got a real excuse here. Don't worry. You're fine. You're fine.
I do want to learn the language, and I have a lot of Japanese friends who are my very close friends, but of course they're all fluent in English, and so it's just the way that I'm not forced.
Yeah.
If I were put in a position where I was forced, would I figure it out? I can guarantee you I would.
Pretty sure you can. Yeah, you can learn Japanese. I can imagine you doing that. But yeah, like I mean, Japan is such a unique country in that sense.
It is.
I landed in Japan very randomly. Like my wife is Japanese, and I proposed to her. Her family was like, not really keen on you. So I'm like, oh, I'm coming to Japan. I'll study a little bit Japanese. But I never watched those YouTube videos. I had no clue what I was getting into. I studied English very fast. I was like, I'm gonna learn Japanese super
Yeah, you
fast.
learned another
Yeah,
language. That
yeah,
would give me a little bit of confidence.
yeah.
I've
But
never
no, that's
learned.
the thing. I was completely delusional. Like I was like, oh, Japanese, and oh, hiragana. Yeah, no problem. Katakana. Wait, what? Kanji. Yeah, I'm out of this.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
I
out.
didn't.
I'm out.
Yeah. So iSpace right now, like, what's your day-to-day look like? Because it's so hard for me to imagine
To
your
imagine.
job in
Yeah.
general. Like,
Well, I can talk about it
mm,
kind of like at a high level in the terms of, yeah, like what the heck do you do? Especially when there's nothing in space right now. I get this question a lot, especially with friends and family. They're like, so
yeah.
you just like hanging out or you just
Just
looking at
waiting
the
for something to
countdown
be up
waiting?
there.
Turns out, while a huge part of my job is obviously flying the spacecraft, the other part of my job is preparing for that moment.
Mm,
The difference between good operations and bad operations is how prepared you are. Granted, you can never be prepared for everything. There are so many uncertainties in space. In fact, my job is about handling uncertainties. Space itself, your space components, they get really, really hot, they get really, really cold. Space weather, you've got solar radiation, you've got radical particles. I mean, is everything out there is trying to kill you already. It's already trying to kill you. And our job is to deal with that. So it's not that we go to launch with our fingers crossed and
yeah.
just say,
Pray.
I hope that everything's okay. And if something goes wrong, you're scrambling to figure it out in the moment.
Yeah.
No, we really think thoughtfully about all of these things. We develop a lot of things on the ground here on Earth before we ever launch. And we spend a lot of time doing this and a lot of energy working with the engineers who are designing the spacecraft so that we also in turn are preparing ourselves. We have to be certified to be on console. I'm not immune from that. I may be a flight director, but I have to earn that title. So you have a certification list, a skill set that you have to show, and we have to design what our operations is going to look like. So you start being let go from the rocket. Now what? What's the first 24 hours look like? 48 hours. Okay? You're in space, you need to perform a large maneuver. What does that look like? What are you spending your time going
as detailed as
as
possible.
detailed as possible? I want to know what we are doing every single day of the mission. If you ask me that question, I should have an answer for you.
Do a lot of simulation stuff as well. And
yes. So you design, you implement, you've got to build tons of products. The products could be anything from a checklist. Literally think of a checklist, check boxes. What do you do first, second, third, in this order? It's not scripted. You have to be able to go off script, but you do have a nominal, we love the word nominal in space. You have a nominal plan, a normal plan. If nothing was to go awry, this is what you would do, and this should work. You have all the software tools. You have the tools that take me saying, I want to fire the thrusters and make that a reality. So I can't just say it, I got to turn it into the language the spacecraft understands, and I need to use tools in order to do that. All of these software tools, you have all of the ground stuff that you need in order to communicate with the spacecraft. We don't just use magic. You have to use these giant antennas located all over the world. You need to communicate with them, get your signals sent. Everything, all of this is part of the process. So you've got the software, you've got the checklist, the processes, documentation, you've got the working with the engineers to understand, creating manuals of how all the subsystems work, the thermal system, the power system, the avionics, the systems. Who am I missing? Guidance, navigation, and control. I don't know how I can miss that. That's like one of my favorites.
And all those engineers as well.
Yes, you have to work with the engineers. And we have like a symbiotic relationship too. It's not just a one-way street where they tell us what they've done. We give feedback too, because ultimately we are their final customer. They built this thing and they're entrusting it to us to finish the mission. So we have to understand it like the customer has to. We have to know how to use it. And then the last part of it is the validation. Certify the people with the products and the processes that you intend to do in flight. So, I mean, we have a launch coming up very soon, December, no earlier than December launch. And That
You
means
feel ready?
I do. I do feel ready. And I've seen the growth of our team, and I see where we are right now. And it's been an absolute like pleasure to be able to play an even larger role this time around with Mission 2, the flight operations, and getting us to this point where we can say, like, I feel ready. Like,
That's awesome.
I really mean that.
What would you say is the ratio between preparation and the action? Because it feels like it's kind of like for an athlete in the Olympics, for example. Right? You train so much for the Olympics. That moment is so short compared to all the preparation. What would be the ratio, would you say?
You know, it really depends on your mission. For iSpace, far more preparation than the mission. The mission is like 4 months and change. The preparation started the second the first mission stopped. And that is not even accurate because they were already planning the second mission while the first mission was in motion. Okay, it's a fast turnaround on purpose. You're not trying to be slow or doing it let's check all, you have to be agile because of the resource constraints and this and that. But also, if you want to see a future where this becomes commonplace, you got to prove that it can be commonplace. It has to be reliable, repeatable, all these things.
You want to learn the most as well per mission, right? Like you want to optimize the learning curve.
Exactly. And these first missions are technological demonstrations on top of that. They're part of R&D. We're learning from them. So it's better to just get something out there and understand it.
Would you say it's like what, 95% preparation, 5% action? Like I'm just trying to kind of...
It depends on who you ask. Because if you were to ask maybe a design engineer who, they do their part and then they're finished and on to the next one, they might say, maybe the operation is like 5%. For me and my job, I call it 50-50. Even though the time you spend doing each of the phases of the mission, the design, the making the thing, the putting it together, the testing it, to the eventual launch and operations and decommissioning. The amount of time you're spending in operations at our company is not as long as the time we spend in the phases leading up to that. But I can tell you it feels just as long. It feels just as long.
Preparation sounds so stressful. Like I personally, I have a weird kind of relationship with stress. I love to put stress on my own as long as if I mess up, it doesn't affect anyone. So I love to, even when it comes to competing, I love to compete with myself on a lot of things. I'll try to challenge myself all the time. But if it has to be challenging with someone else or if someone suffers from me not delivering, I really don't handle well stress. You sound like an opposite. It's very different on this one.
Excuse me.
No worries.
Well, I think I'm only at that place because our CEO and our leadership team has done a really good job at just recognizing the position that we are being put in and letting us know that they have our backs 100%. Like 100%. They understand that what we are doing is not easy. Our CEO has this dream, and it's incredible. Can you imagine?
Your CEO is an engineer himself.
He's an engineer himself. He went to school in America, at Georgia Tech. I mean, he went from having this dream, and he really sees us as the people who are helping him to realize it, not the people who are messing it up for him or in the way. He truly sees us as real human beings who are trying to support this vision that he's come up with. And you feel that. He sent us an email in our first mission right before we launched. And I remember reading that email, and I don't remember word for word, but I just remember him assuring us that no matter what happens, he is so proud that he was able to create this company that could even say they got to the point where they could be put on a rocket to be launched.
Yeah.
And it did get launched, and it went much further than that. And so in the end of the day, I don't really go home stressed saying, if I mess up, my team messes up, we've ruined it for everybody. We put it all on ourselves because it really does feel like even in our victories, it's not my team. It's not a me thing. This is not the kind of industry where you walk away saying, I'm the reason why we landed on the moon. I'm the reason we succeeded. It's not an I type of place. It's a we type of place. We revel in everybody's successes and the failures too. It's not a one-person show, and I really appreciate that about working here.
Yeah, I think that like you mentioned, that email from CEO just before, and that sounds like the right mindset for sure, and you guys are all inspired by it.
Yeah.
When it comes to, I guess, a little broader here, but like the future of the space industry, like what are the current challenges that, I mean, the whole industry is facing right now, and that if we kind of get through that challenge, we're into the next level. I mean, obviously, like, yeah, I think 2-3 days ago, SpaceX accomplished something big again, and like, but
Yeah.
what kind of challenges are we talking about in general that need to kind of be solved?
I think that the biggest challenge is proving that you can do it more than once. It is one thing to like have your one-off mission that does something incredible. And those missions, they change everything. They're revolutionary. But I think the next step for space is proving that you can do it again and again and again. This is what's going to allow us to like realize the dreams of, I'm sure you've heard of the Artemis mission by NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just like America's government who is saying the moon is the future. We have other governments around the world who are interested in it too. Look at Japan, the JAXA mission SLIM that landed on the moon in style, upside down. But they landed and they got a picture using a robot about this big named Sora. Like, I love it. It's just amazing. India landed on the moon. I mean, it's a really exciting time right now because you can see that there is genuine interest in not just talking about like going back to the moon, but actually doing it and doing it better.
And more participants.
Oh man, more participants, talking about lunar-based creation, talking about having like your International Space Station, but moon style. I mean, it is incredible. All the companies you hear about right now is amazing. So I think that the big hurdle is how do we really empower these smaller companies to be able to be a piece of the puzzle? That's one of the things. The other thing, though, that maybe is not so related to like this drive to the moon and almost to Mars and all these things is, well, at least it's important to me, but how do we do something for our own planet too?
Right. That's the question I want to ask you as well, actually. Like,
okay, I'll let you ask it then.
Yeah. No, like how? Like, why should like people who are not in the industry care and actually?
Why should you care? Yeah. I mean, it's really important for me to be working on something that I believe in. I do not want to spend my whole life knowing that from the hours of 9 to 5, 9 to 6, or whatever they may be, or 2 in the morning, whatever they may be, I don't want to look back and say, I really could have done something for the world. And I chose not to. And so I'm very intentional about the type of work that I do and the type of work that because I have to believe in the end goal. And for me right now, being in the space industry is vitally important. We rely on space and space technology far more than people realize. If you use your phone, you got GPS, you need to make a satellite call because you're lost in the mountains hiking, you're trying to bring internet to places that would never have it otherwise. This is space. We rely on it. And space has a really big problem right now. And it's that low Earth orbit is very crowded. There is a lot going on in space that people don't realize. I think people think of space like there's probably
about space debris.
Space debris. Yep, people know about. I get a lot of questions about space debris. Like, what about all that junk?
We had Aaron Lynch on the podcast.
Okay.
A few episodes ago. Yeah. He was talking about
right.
as well.
Yes, and space debris is a very real problem, and it doesn't just affect our ability to do these cool science things. In fact, I look at all the science that we do in space as a way to reflect on our own planet. What's going on over here and how can we bring that back to Earth and do something about it? I don't want that space to be crowded. We are observing our planet right now with tons of very interesting Earth observing, remote sensing science instruments that are put on these satellites. We got tons of projects looking at water levels, topography, deforestation, wildfires spreading, hurricanes. How can you even get a handle on fixing the problem here on Earth if you don't know what the problem is?
Yeah.
But to even bring it even further, we've got projects that are pushing the envelope and they're trying to figure out not just what are we observing, but what's going on at the ground that we think might be contributing to this thing that we're observing. I mean, it is vitally important. We should all be very invested in the success of space, the accessibility to get to space, to bring the costs down so that space is not this thing that you think of only billionaires and millionaires. I want this to be an area where we can be involved. Everyone can be involved, to have a say, because it affects us all.
Yeah, I think from what you say is like space basically allows us to understand better Earth.
Yes.
And that's why we should all kind of care, right?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah, like I'm so lucky because I get to like hire for all those space companies and meet all those people, and I'm like, man, how did I get there? And like, how do I talk to so much cool people? And I get so excited about this industry, and for which in the first place I was like, I don't care. Like I'm not part of this, but like you mentioned,
you
remote
absolutely
sensing and all
are.
those companies that that I am surrounded with. I'm like, wow, this is more important than anyone realizes, and
Yeah.
it's insane to see how much they struggle to raise money often as well. Like, where it's like, wait, that's where we should really put the emphasis on. Like,
Yeah.
they struggle to raise money. The salaries are not competitive, and so they can't get the best talent.
Yeah.
And the talent is wasted on like crypto.
Listen,
I'm not thinking, I love blockchain.
I didn't say it.
No, but like I just see it from that like
Yeah.
the talent pool that gets diluted into those things, and I'm like, why should we not fix things that really matter here?
I mean, I think that's always been a thing, though. Even, at a place like MIT, you're graduating students who worked their butt off. I'm not going to lie. They worked probably for their entire academic life to get to where they were. They worked even harder once they got to MIT. They graduate. They may have been like me. They graduate with debt and have no way to pay it, besides having a job that can allow them to pay for it. And really, they may be the first in their generation to ever be in a position like this where they can help their family. And sometimes you've got to make the decision that protects yourself, to let you be financially stable before you go on and do the things you care about. I just so happen to be able to align with that. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the things I wish I had. Of course, there's always more, right? But I never had to want for anything growing up. My parents they always took care of us, and they never let us see them struggle, which I don't know how they were able to do that. But I had an amazing childhood, and I would never want it to be any different than it was. But part of me also wants, like, my parents to never have to work again. Well, they did retire.
Yeah.
A good job, Mom and Dad.
Nice.
They did retire. But I want them to really be able to enjoy it to the absolute fullest. And I understand this allure of especially tons of these software companies who are pulling you in and saying, come with us. We've got an app. We've got a new social media
high
thing.
Margins. No hardware.
Yeah, no hardware, high margins, I really do understand it. And there really is no hate for these people, because honestly, I think that at a certain point, and I hope this, and I really think that deep down, there's a desire for this, and people do this. They spend those early years making money so they don't have to worry about it ever again. Yeah. And then they come out and do something crazy amazing that the whole world benefits from.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing. The blame doesn't go to the engineer who goes for that high-paying job, or it's just the nature of it. It was like,
it is.
Can we recognize what really matters?
Capitalism.
Yeah, let's not go into this one. But one of the questions often also like, how can space be monetized? We spoke a bit about it off camera, but like, what's your thought on that? Like, how can space actually be monetized?
It's a good question, because I've never really had to think about this before. I was working for NASA, a place where, thank you everybody for your tax dollars, including me. We have government support to be able to do these missions. And I really, in my mind, in my head, I'm not thinking about we're going to go under, because you have the support of the country. And it was also really nice just to see the support of the public, my friends, my family, cheering us on, saying, yes, NASA is worth, I don't know what it is, something like 12 cents or something per taxpayer. Really? I will print out some colored pictures of, the planets and say, money well spent.
Thanks for funding.
Yeah, in terms, it seems like big numbers, but in terms of like the percentages of the entire budget for America, NASA's tiny. So I never really had to worry about like the business side of things. But now being at iSpace, it's very clear that you have to have a plan. I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs like yourself, like our CEO, Hakamada-san, because they've been able to find a way to show people, convince people, not even convince, I don't even think it's convincing. It is to just show people what you're trying to do and get them on board. And iSpace has done it in some, I think, really clever ways. It's not just the customers who are like our payloads. So we have a spacecraft. We're not just going to land on the moon for nothing. We're bringing the things I talked about in the beginning. It
Yeah.
all wraps around the instrument science to be able to find out new things about the moon. You've got rovers, you've got these experiments. We want to have that future where people can maybe be on a lunar base. So you need to bring stuff with you to try it out, technology.
Yeah.
So we've got those customers. But there's also like partners who, they're on the logo on the spacecraft itself or in the mission control center, or they do commercials with us. They promote us, or I don't know, they supply the clocks in our mission control center.
Right.
They're
Materials
very
for,
like
yeah.
super innovative with that. And partners really thinking down the line too, because if we do have a lunar base, then what's not to say we can open it up to construction and energy and these industries that may not feel like there's a place for them in space right now, but
Yeah.
we're saying, no, we really think that there can be. Like, who better to make like a vehicle you could drive on the moon than a company like a car
Yeah.
company? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess people just don't see yet the timeline being in their favor, or like they just don't feel maybe it's close enough to really feel involved yet.
I
Like,
think they're gonna get there though, because the
it's making more
further
and more
we get,
headlines, and
yeah, it's making more headlines and we're gonna have more capabilities. Like
Yeah.
data services, that's another big one. Like if we
Yeah.
don't have this dark spot on the dark side of the moon, you don't have communications because it's facing away from Earth. You need to be facing the antenna on Earth in order to communicate. Let's say we put some communication relay satellites in orbit around the moon. Now we have more of a data change. Now more of the moon has opened up. We need to put it's like the infrastructure has to exist.
right.
It's very difficult to get the infrastructure there. This is the hard part. We're in the pain part. But once we get that part,
Yeah.
the barrier to being able to say, oh, I can see my business, taking my business to the moon. I can see it now.
Yeah.
So
Same with, I mean, even the internet, right? Setting up the whole infrastructure for the internet, and suddenly everyone
yes,
lives from the internet. But it was very hard probably to convince the first guys, like, hey,
very hard,
gotta
right?
build up that whole grid and like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. We need the boom.
yeah,
We're leading up to it.
yeah. Another question that I wanted to ask you is like, for me as a recruiter as well out there, like most of the engineers, I'll probably say 80-90% are men in the industry. So there seems to be an issue when it comes to diversity, and I want to talk with you about that as well.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? How can we solve that issue as well? Because I see it as an issue often. Like a lot of my clients come to me saying, "Hey, we would like to hire more female. We would like to have more diversity in the team," but somehow everyone seems to struggle with that. Like, what seems to be the issue? Yeah.
I think I was very fortunate in that my engineering career truly started at MIT. And at MIT, there was basically a 50-50 split between women and men at that school. So I was in classes and I was not the only woman. I wasn't even the only woman of color in my aerospace engineering major, which is pretty huge to me.
Yeah.
And it was not, I will say it was not 50-50 in each of the majors though. There was definitely still some disconnect there. And then I move on to NASA. I'm working at JPL specifically. And I was honestly really impressed. I felt like everywhere I turned, there was a woman in a leadership position that I could look up to and be like, oh, you're so cool. I even remember having a meeting one time on one of my projects. And we were like, this is an all-woman call.
Wow.
Wow. It felt really cool. Like it was a great moment. But the reality of the industry is that there's not enough. There's not enough. And, I noticed this very early on. Even when I was at JPL, I noticed very early on, it's a lack of diversity, right? It's a lack of, why does it feel like maybe a little too cookie cutter? Maybe all from the same school, maybe all from the same kinds of majors, maybe leaning more towards men and not really a history of women being here or in leadership positions. And then people of color, where's the representation there? So at first I felt a little defeated about it, but then I realized, but also I can do something about it. Hello, I am here. I am at NASA. And you know what? Every time I talk to people about my job and I tell them how excited I am about it, they get excited too.
Yeah.
So how about I just bring this energy outside of work? And very quickly, I realized that doing outreach, I considered it part of my job. It's part of the package to not just work on these cool things and keep it to myself.
When you say outreach, you mean like inspiring others to come on the journey?
Inspiring students, especially those students who don't even know it's possible. That's the thing about dreams. Dreams are not always what people define them to be. It's not that you could dream up anything, but did you even know you could dream that thing up? Where was it put in front of you? Did you have the information? I can tell you right now, the dreams of a rural kid are very different than the dreams of a city
That's
kid.
true.
And my goal was to just introduce this possibility that you can do something that's out of this world
Yeah.
in your lifetime. Because if I could do it, and I'm me. If
Yeah.
I could do it, you can do it too.
Yeah.
And I really think that hearing that message when you are young is the first step to fixing the problem.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike.
No worries.
Fixing the problem upstream. It is a pipeline problem. If only a certain amount of women are graduating with the STEM degree, you have less of a pool to hire from. So how do we get more interested in the first place in STEM? You have to start young and encouraging that there is a space for you here, a really amazing space for you here. You can become a woman flight director. At my company, we actually have two women flight directors. We're pretty proud of that. And just seeing us sometimes is enough to just spark that initial curiosity that will power them on once they get into high school and have the challenging questions and the classes and all of that too.
Yeah, I respect that a lot from you, actually. I see you doing it, and I saw some videos of you on YouTube. It's like, I was telling once, I'm like, man, I'm super nervous to have Janelle. I was like, oh my God, she's a rock star. Like, but I think it's amazing. And like you say, going for very young people when they still feel like being allowed to dream. And
yes,
because you only dream about stuff that you have information about, right?
It's true.
You're not that creative in your dreams, actually.
Exactly.
Right? So if you're like, hey, this is possible, this is like, everything starts for me with an envelope, like a pamphlet of MIT, and like, oh wow, this is super accessible.
Yes.
So no, I do respect that a lot. Like, which impact do you want to have on the space industry beside like, inspiring other people?
Well, I want to land on the moon.
Boom.
I'm very invested in that. I'm very thankful that I had a chance at all to be able to go for a landing on the moon. So thankful for my team, the people I had around me, surrounding me. I mean, Mission 1 was very special. I'll never forget it. It's kind of like, what are they calling that on like TikTok, Instagram? Oh my gosh, it's from inside the Spider-Verse. Those moments that keep on happening, like Mary Jane and, oh, the uncle always has to die. You know what I'm talking about?
No clue. Not on TikTok.
It's okay. Someone is going to know what I'm talking about. It's like these moments that have to happen. That is a moment I'll never forget. It's implanted in me. And it is a vital part, I think, of the future me. The future me had to go through that to get to wherever I'm going to go next. But ultimately, besides landing on the moon, which is something I really, really, really do want to do, I want to find a way. I really just want to find a way to make a lasting impact on humanity, and especially on the crises that we are experiencing. And when I say crises, I mean the fact that we are now thinking of the moon and Mars as escape pods from Earth.
Yeah.
I do not want to give up on Earth. People ask me, would you ever go to space? And yeah, I mean, if somebody offered me to go to space, I don't imagine a scenario where I would say no, but I would never give up on Earth. It would never be a permanent thing for me. This planet is so important. And as someone who has worked in space and has traveled to different places in our solar system, seen what is out there, I've talked to scientists, I'm sorry, but I'm not inclined to leave this place. It's quite special.
Yeah.
The Earth is a special place, and I don't want to just let it go. And the great thing, though, is that I do think we can do something about it. And beyond the information gathering, we're obviously at a place where people know that there's something up, right? We don't need to speculate that there is something wrong. But I do think that now's not the time to give up on Earth. Now's the time to use what we
Yeah.
have learned to do something about it. And I really want to be a part of that.
Yeah, the escape vibe. Like, which movie was that? Like, Don't Look Up. I think that was the movie.
Oh, I didn't
That,
watch it. My brother watched that.
yeah, but
He
like
said it
the
was
end
good.
is like literally like the space is literally like, okay, they know everything goes bad on Earth. And
Ugh.
it's like all those rich millionaires, billionaires, they're gone, you know. And it feels that way sometimes. But
I mean, that's
yeah.
also why I'm such a big proponent in accessibility in all senses of the word. If we can make it easier and cost less, then it's not just a billionaire or a millionaire
Right.
playground. It can be open to us. Planes didn't start off with people like you and me. I'm sorry, but we were not getting on planes. It was people who were rich.
True.
But their money also helped fund the industry and make it get to a point where it could become accessible. So
yeah, I mean, Phil,
we
these
need
days we're
that.
reversing this a little bit, like the flight ticket. I don't want to watch how much it's going to cost me to go back
Oh my God.
to Belgium. But
Oh man, yeah.
wow. Janelle, you're crazy interesting, and I feel like we can keep going. Let's finish up with
Yes,
some rapid fire
sure,
questions,
okay.
and then two, I guess, slightly deeper questions. But Mars or the moon for a vacation? Which one?
The moon, because it's easier to come back.
Gotta come back. You want to come back? That's a
I
good
want to
sign.
come back.
All right. What's the weirdest space fact you know?
Probably that it smells like methane on Titan. So you got some cow farts over there.
Okay.
Titan is a
Perfect.
moon
Love
of
it.
Saturn, and it's got these awesome lakes and methane everywhere, and you can even go swimming.
A book or a movie to relax?
A book.
Book.
Yeah.
Favorite hobby overall?
I don't want to be a poser because I feel like a hobby is something you do all the time. But I will say scuba diving is the most magical thing that I've ever done. And anytime I get in the water and have the opportunity to do that, it feels like I'm in space.
I don't want to scare you, but when I asked Stability AI about you, it's what it said. Which is scary. Anyway.
Oh my
A
God.
little bit of a deeper one here, but what's the kindest thing someone has ever done to you? Or
The
for you?
kindest thing. Oh my gosh. This is a really deep question.
Yeah. You take more time on this one.
The kindest thing anyone's ever done for me. Maybe I'll say here, my mom. My mom has advocated for me since I was tiny and didn't even know she was doing it. And only really recently, as I've been getting older, has she been sharing these stories with me. But my mom said, I was her firstborn child, and she said that when she had me, she knew that there was something with me, which I'm like, Mom, you're scaring me. What does that mean? But she could tell that I was different because I had such a joy when it came to anything in school. I was so excited. I had such an innate desire to learn. She saw that and she nurtured it from the start. And even though my mom, my dad, they couldn't really help me on my homework and these things, turns out that doesn't really matter. What they helped is they helped me understand that my love for learning was important and they were going to do whatever they could to back that. Even when I moved to a new school, making sure the school knew, give her everything.
Yeah.
She's ready for it, and that's what she
And moving
needs.
away, which is very painful as a parent.
Oh yeah, they don't like that.
Yeah.
But they also
imagine.
support me here too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Best advice you ever received from someone?
Well, it's the advice that I like to give my students when I talk to them. Don't even let gravity hold you down. And I mean that sincerely. Really, the sky is the limit. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've had my aha moment. The astronaut professor, I want them to have it too and realize that one day they're probably going to be my boss. Let's be real. And I'm excited. I'm excited for that.
Love it. keeps you humble as well. A bit of more selfish question here for myself, being a father, and again, discovering that curiosity is extremely important quite late in my life, and something that I want to teach the same way your parents probably, or your mom, or I guess your parents did for you. Like, how would you teach that to a kid? That
Really?
like embrace that curiosity, kind of. Yeah.
It's don't ever let a kid feel like their interests are too weird or bizarre to chase. I grew up playing with with Barbies. I also grew up playing with video games. I was big into the GameCube, the Xbox, the PlayStation. I loved my Legos. I loved the racetracks. I loved the Kinects and the log building things, action figures. I was definitely more leaning towards the boys aisle of Toys R Us, our like kids store in America, than I was the pink aisle. And guess what? My parents could have been like, you need to dress, heels. Why not makeup? Why not the baby doll? They just let me do my thing. And because of that, later in life, I felt like, why can't I just do whatever I want?
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Love it. Janelle, I mean, I knew this was going to be awesome, but you delivered. I guess, where can people find more about you online as well? Because you're pretty active on social media and stuff, right?
I'm sometimes active, probably going to be less active in the next coming month.
You should focus.
Yes, I just want people to realize my social media is a vehicle for me to show that I do have a life outside of work. My work is very important to me, but I also have loved my time in Japan. So if you want to follow along, you can find me on Instagram at It's Janelle, and you can learn more about me on my website and also reach out to me on my website, which is www.janellewellons.com, as plain as it gets. That's where you're going to find me.
Awesome. Janelle, thank you so much. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Cheers.
This is great.